Hello, everyone. Welcome to HeadHunters Northwest podcast. And today I have the tremendous pleasure of welcoming Chris DiCenso. He is the managing partner for Growth Strategy Partners and well known in the firearms industry and outdoor industry. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Shaylene. And I'm known well, right? Not bad.
Let's see. It's kind of sketch.
Mostly. Great to be here. Thank you.
I really appreciate you joining us. And this is such a treat. I hope people get as much out of this as I think they will. You and I have known each other quite a few years now and started with running into each other at trade shows. And it's just been a really I think a treasured friendship for me, and not only just work related, but just part of what makes our industry what it is. I think it's very unique in the outdoor shooting sports industry. Your people you work with become friends.
It's definitely, a good friendship that we have. For those listening, I work with Shaylene on both sides. You've helped
That's
me.
True. I forgot about that. Yeah.
You almost placed me in a job once, and you've helped me hire two buyers.
That's true.
So I've seen both sides of you.
The good and the bad.
And I can attest. You're one of the best. I can attest.
Well, it's really fun when you get to work with your friends, and that's what it really becomes, I think, in this industry, which is, I know other industries have that too, but not to the volume that I've ever experienced, like in the shooting sports industry.
Very much so. Very, very much so.
So
that's a great part of it.
Yeah. Well, tell our listeners, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, about how you even came into the shooting sports industry, because that's what a lot of people wonder. They think, I'd love to work there. How did you get into this?
So I started shooting in college. So I guess this will be public, but yeah, I live in the People's Republic of Massachusetts. And I was shooting in college, Worcester Polytech, and started loving guns and had some job offers when I graduated to actually make nuclear subs for General Electric. But I said, wow, I wanted to go really work for a gun company. And so I told my parents, hey, I'm coming home, I'm going to look for a job. And they were very excited about that. And I sent resumes out to a lot of gun manufacturers. And it was literally a Friday night as I'm walking out the door, probably around 4 or 5 o'clock. And the phone rings. I pick it up and I said, hi. And they go, is Chris there? I say, this is Chris. This is Bill Ruger. I'd like to know if you want to come work for me. And I go, yeah. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I'm like, sure. And he's like, would you like to know what the job is? And I'm like,
no, don't care.
So yeah, pretty much no, but yes. So, and again, I was a manufacturing engineer, so it's interesting. Mm-hmm. And as I was thinking through, kind of points here, I was a manufacturing engineer, so you don't need the industry experience necessarily as manufacturing. And there's some jobs where you don't need industry experience, manufacturing, finance, mm-hmm. HR, something like that. You don't necessarily need industry experience. And yeah, I didn't have it, although I'd been shooting, and that was it. So I started off in working for Ruger back in 1986.
You started up here at the top of the food chain.
I a kid in a candy store. I mean, I was working in a gun company, yeah. And indirectly, I look in hindsight, I knew Bill Ruger Sr. was, big guy, but looking back, you're like, wow, I worked indirectly for Bill Ruger Sr. So it was great. Yeah. So that got me into it. And then I've been in and out of it, over the years. But that got me into it. And I'll even jump, forward a little to consulting. So I did a lot of consulting, then started Growth Strategy Partners in 2003. And I remember talking to people, I'd go to the SHOT Show now trying to sell consulting services. And I would talk about growth and improving the business. And they're like, that's great. That's nice. And then later on in some conversations, I'd say, well, I worked for Ruger, back in the early days. And all of a sudden, oh, you're one of us.
You've been credibility goes a long way.
Very much so. Yep.
And you and I actually met, I believe our friend, I'm totally drawing a blank now. What is his name? And I know it. Anyway, one of our friends introduced us and we were at SHOT Show and you were doing some consulting for Benelli at the time.
Yes.
Greg
Yes.
Mooney
Greg Mooney.
introduced
Was
us.
Greg the one that? Okay. Yep.
Greg.
Yep.
And
Yes.
you were doing
Yes.
some consulting for Benelli, and it kind of went from there. And you've done a lot of consulting for a lot of different firearms companies over the years. There's been many projects you've been in on. I know we've talked about in the past, and you don't need to share all those names.
Yep.
But I know it seems like every trade show that I've gone to, gosh, you're always there. I can't get rid of you.
Thank you. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe what you're seeing in the firearms industry and maybe some areas that, I mean, I don't know if you want to touch on that now, but maybe a little bit about the changes you've seen, because there's definitely been some changes over the last, I'd say, 5 years.
Yeah, you've got, I mean, the industry, right, still is, and always has been, I'm going to use the word insular. Maybe it's usually a negative term, but it's definitely been, if you're in the industry, you're known, it keeps it in the industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember back in 1986, I was the first degreed engineer Ruger had. Okay. And so there's still that, although, you go back probably 10 years or so, they started now hiring outside expertise at the executive level. So Black & Decker's been known. Some of the companies like that have been getting people in on the consumer product side, thinking, oh, they'll learn consumer products and they can do it with the gun industry. And that there's been some successes and some failures with that, right?
Right.
So there's been a little trend of improving the people side on the business by looking outside, which is good because we don't have enough necessarily people inside with the experience level.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. Yeah.
And then you obviously had, the pandemic from 21, 22, 2021, 22, the whole pandemic buying, has changed. So what's changing, I think, going forward is that it's definitely becoming more competitive. Previous to Growth Strategy Partners, and I worked for Camfour for 3.5 years. He was the president there, one of the wholesalers in the industry. And, it became more competitive, even during, the COVID, the pandemic buying. Performance became tougher to achieve. The supply chain in this industry is terrible. That's probably the biggest thing that I've run into.
Yeah.
Just delivery performance, reliable performance, expectation setting. So in the future, it's going to be more competitive. Yeah. So, you as a candidate, if you can bring some value add, something to increase revenues, decrease costs, improve the culture, and outperform, the competition, that's what the industry needs. That's what I think is definitely needed. Personally, I think we need, 10 million more supply chain people so that we can improve the supply chain, but that's just back my engineering side.
Yeah, right. No, that would be very nice. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that would agree with you, especially after the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's hard to get stuff, but yeah.
Let's talk about that. We knew each other when you went and you were hired to come in as the president for Camfour. Let's talk about how that, what did you get to learn from that experience about talent, and how did you hire people, and what did you see work for you guys as far as talent skill set versus what doesn't work? Because people are, they really want to know, how do I interview better? What questions do I ask? Or, how do I follow up? What worked for you as the president of that organization?
I'll admit first that I'm very picky. I definitely follow the adage of, hire slow and fire fast. Even with internally, some of the people within the company were like, well, why are you doing your 4th and 5th interview? I'm like, I want to make sure this person's a good fit. Right. And it's all about fit. So when I was there, I'd hired, head of sales, controller, a lot of salespeople, and then through you, a couple buyers. Right. So when I look at, and kind of related to this, I hired a lot, obviously, as a consulting management consultant. I'd help the owners hire people there. So I've done a lot of work in that space. Yeah. When without getting too deep into it, right, you've got the technical skills that someone has. So, the functional skills, if you will. You've got the interpersonal skills that someone needs to have, the leadership skills that they're looking for. And then you got the industry experience piece, right? If you look
Right.
at, and that's across any job, there's always the question about how much industry experience you need or want. You
Yeah.
know, up until this industry, I've always been very low on industry experience, meaning, you know, it's less important. I'll take an A salesperson with B industry experience versus the, you know, B A experience and B skill set. It's a little different with this industry because of the knowledge of the people you're working with. And it's like, it's a consumer product.
Yeah.
So, you know, your resume will deal with your technical skills, but it comes to the interview is really where I found some separation. Some people show up prepared. They've done their research. They know who Camfour is. They know who my client is. They understand the industry. That's actually probably the big thing that I see and I get frustrated by is when I interview someone, regardless of what the position's for, and they tell, and I may ask a question. So how would you deal with this? How would you increase sales? And they would explain to me how they've done everything in the past at their last company, which doesn't necessarily apply to the company that we're working for now. Right.
Right.
So the key to me, you know, I talk to people a lot is about, you've got to understand the situation that's going on. You know?
Yeah. I mean, they should at the very least know is that, you know, are they interviewing at a manufacturer? Are they interviewing at a distributor? I mean, you know, they need to at least do some basic research. We have all the tools at our fingertips on our phones, no less.
And, you know, that, and, you know, whether it be LinkedIn, you can find some people that might have some connections to me or the person that you're hiring with. Right. So, the ones that have separated themselves from me have been, done a lot of research, know as much as they can about the company or the position, asked great questions. I mean, I'd hired, you know, personally just salespeople, you know, and those people are asking me, so what are your goals, Chris? What are you going to do for this company? How are you going to make it better? And I'm like, wow, you know, this is just literally an entry-level salesperson and they're worried about the big picture.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference to me. I'm like, this person's thinking. It's not just, well, you know, how many guns you need me to sell, or what's
I think that's a really, really, really important thing that people should apply to any job and any interview. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that it's very important that they think past their own position and what their daily world is, because the truth of the matter is, you know, what if the president didn't have any goals? Do you really want to work there?
Right. Well, you know, and as you know, some people just need a job, so they'll take kind of anything.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily want to convey that, you know, in the interview, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, so the people, and I would always, you know, it's interesting, a little technique I'd learned early on, not necessarily the greatest approach, but to start the interview process, usually you're asking all the questions and then you turn it over to the candidate. And I did this a few times. And so, you know, start the interview off. I said, so what questions do you have for me? And I just started right there. And
that's
just
great.
Are they prepared?
Yeah.
I mean, so if you're a candidate, listen to this, right? You know, be prepared for someone to turn the table on you and say, so, you know, what questions do you have?
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what kind of questions so when you're interviewing and you say, you know, your last role, I know you're getting ready to start another project and help another organization consulting, but in the last role, when you were building a team, did you like to do one-on-one interviews? Do you like to do panel interviews? How do you like to bring people in?
So I am back to what I call being a genetically coded engineer, very analytical in my approach. Sorry.
Yeah,
you know, yes, you know. So again, I build, you know, I suggest we build a profile on what we're looking for. So one of the things that I usually find out is that as let's say there's 3 or 4 people that make sense to interview, what we aren't always on the same team or what we're looking for. How much industry experience do we want? So again, hiring head of sales, how much sales experience do we want? How much national account experience do we want? You know, how much do they work with dealers versus wholesalers? So I find a lot of companies don't lay that out first. So I get,
Yep.
I'll admit, very anal. Okay, so 40% of the
As
jobs.
I recall, it came on a spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you did the same thing. You gave me a whole layout, and
Yeah.
I mean that's why that's why I like working with you. But so so the general process is, let's agree upon what we're hiring, what's important.
Mhm.
If it's someone in sales, so I'd have the head of sales do the first round of interviews, do some screening,
Mhm.
and then I'd have that person say to me, okay, what didn't you hear that you had concerns with, so that I could then ask the same question and
That's
see,
great.
try to get, so you get some similar answers or better answers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I would do that to the third person in line, saying, okay, here's what we've talked about. Here's what we've heard. Why don't you ask these things? Because we both heard a question on this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like individual
Okay.
interviews. I don't like the group. I think it's just we're not coordinated enough to do it well.
Yeah.
So I'll do it one-on-one, but then have a debrief with each person after we do the interview, so the next person in line can ask some more educated questions.
Yeah, that's good. I just thought of something I kind of wanted to ask you that I did not prep you for, but I am curious.
Yep.
I didn't think about this before, but so when we're, our industry, we have a lot of companies that still feel like, even for roles that might be acceptable to be remote, that a lot of our industry employers really want a butt in the chair, right? You need to be in the office, and I don't disagree with that in some roles, for sure. And obviously, if you're on the manufacturing floor, you need to be to work. Yeah. But my question to you is, I know that you did have people who worked remotely, and you had people who worked in the office. So having gone through this whole COVID thing, I would love your perspective on, how do you supervise people successfully and empower them and train them? Because people still need training and mentoring when they're remote.
Yes. To me, it's back to setting goals and expectations. So whether you're in the office or remote, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the big difference is you can't build as strong of a culture when people are remote, because you're not in together and see each other every day. So personally, I have a bias of a mixed, I think they call it a hybrid at this point, a little in, a little out.
Okay.
But it's about setting goals and expectations. So, at Camfour, we had about a third of our team was remote. I mean, 2/3 of our sales team was remote, and half our buyers were remote. So let's take the buyers. I got half in-house and half remote. It's all about their goals, So again, as a buyer, they've been measured on gross margin dollars and gross margin growth dollars. So whether you're in-house or outhouse, that's the expectation. So what becomes just more a little challenging is the training done, right?
Yeah.
But again, to bring someone in-house to do training, a lot of our training we did remote.
Yeah.
I mean, through video conference.
But you could help in, as you're continuing helping customers in our industry, it seems like that would be an area that I get requests for things like that, meaning it would be good to have someone come in and do consulting to say, you really can put these people remote and you have more choices and talent. And here's how you measure success. Here's how you do the training. Because I think that our companies do tend to lose out on some talent if they're not able to make that switch. I think COVID did help our industry to force us to move forward, like a lot of other industries.
Well, industries, but as because again, most of the companies in this industry are privately held, right?
Yeah.
So you're dealing with the owners, right?
Yeah.
So either the owners get it or they don't. If they're in the middle, then you can have some conversations. But you and I probably met a lot of owners that just don't agree. If I don't see you, I don't know what you're doing, right?
Well, and I feel for them. I mean, you and I have been self-employed before, and we know what it takes, and it's scary, and when you make a bad hire and you realize you've let that person down and yourself, it's hard. I mean, I think that's one reason that you're such a good consultant for our industry, is because you know how to treat that dollar like it's yours. And it's an easier conversation to go, yeah, I realize this is a risk, but here's why we should try it.
Yep. Well, again, with anything, you got to try something, right? You can't necessarily turn it off because you don't like it or I don't agree with it. So we've both dealt with owners that didn't, whether it be remote work or, I know when you and I've worked together, you've guided me in what type of person I want to get. I might have started over here and you might have shifted. Hey, how about this? So if people aren't open to those conversations, they're lost, they're lost. So
do you, can you touch a little bit on some of the experiences that I know you've had on working with private equity and the kind of high level strategic conversations that you have with organizations that want to buy or sell our firearms companies, because this is often a topic that people are interested in?
Yeah. So, what happened with Growth Strategy Partners is we started off as a traditional consulting firm, just helping, grow revenues, grow profits, and grow their people. And then we got to a point where the owners are going, Chris, we're doing great. I want to sell it. And I said, that's great. And so I had to learn again, how would you sell it? Who would you sell it to? Yeah, you can sell it to, what they call strategic buyers. So like a Smith & Wesson, Colts, some of the Rugers are, larger companies, or you find a private equity firm. So, real quick, as maybe anyone listening here knows, the firearms industry is biased against finance. The finance banks are biased against the firearms industry, right? They won't bank us. And you have private equity the same way. So there's a lot of private equity firms which basically have what they call sponsors, people that give them the money that say, I don't want you to, invest in quote unquote sin industries, which they put firearms into. So there's a small number of, it's actually a decent number, but small in the whole scheme of things, of companies that will invest in buying companies. Now, and again, I'll separate them from guns and ammo, which are regulated, versus outdoor. So any of the accessory companies, holsters, sights, that's different.
Yeah,
that opens up the window a lot more. They're we have talks quite often with owners that want to sell, and my usual question is why, because there's a money piece to it, but there's a lifestyle piece, right? Back to the industry, whether you're owning this or a boating company or something else, it's usually the owner's identity. And if they sell it, are they going to have an identity? Are they going to lose that? So there's a personal piece to this.
Yeah.
But, if you want to sell it, and I've been told this, I see this a lot. Most companies aren't prepared to sell. So if you're ever thinking of selling, you should reach out to someone and find out what needs to happen. Because it's not just, hey, let me show you my financials and give me some money and we're all good.
Yeah, you're reading my mind. That's exactly where I was hoping you'd go, because even if you're even initially thinking someday you might want to sell this, it would be such a great idea to call now. And, someone like you yourself, someone like you that can come in and say, here's the pieces that we need to put together, and this takes time. It is not something that can be done in 3 months.
It's 1 to 3 years. I literally just had somebody call me a week or so ago, saying, hey, Chris, somebody came and, kind of said they'd like to buy me. I'm not sure if I want to sell, not sure if it's worth what it's worth. And I'm not sure if I should sell now or fix some things. I mean, every owner knows there's things they can do to fix their business. But what is that? What would that get them for value at the end? And this company, this owner said, hey, come in and look at my business and tell me what I'm worth now, how much I could get if you fix it, quote unquote, fix it, and how long it would take.
Yeah. Well, this is where I see your strength. I think you're the guy who can come in and see things and solve problems, and you're amazingly organized because you are this analytical person with spreadsheets, but you also have the broader knowledge and experience too. It's not just that. It's not one dimensional.
No, I try to be open-minded.
Tell me what your favorite firearm is that you are interested in right now.
It's probably the one I don't have, right? So I started off as a handgun only.
And competitive shooting, do you still do competitive
I
shooting?
I shoot, yeah, you know, so
Okay.
IDPA, USPSA, 3-gun,
Wow.
and then hunting, right? So I was actually at a low light shoot indoors last night on a Sunday night. It was
Oh,
great.
how fun.
It was awesome. So handgun, I have a Wilson Combat EDC X9 that I just love.
Sweet.
For my rifle, LWRC as my AR. And then, yeah, as you mentioned earlier on the shotgun side, I definitely have a Benelli preference. I've got an
Right.
M2 for 3-gun, and I have an ultralight for upland bird hunting. So
Nice.
yeah, and I keep going through the list, but I think that's
Well, and there should always be a I need to have list too, right?
there's a large need to have list,
Yeah,
right?
I know, me
There's a
too. I
large
did a
need to have
little
list. Yeah.
looking at SHOT Show and made some commitments on some firearms that I
Did
need
you?
to buy. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you? Good, good.
Yeah.
That's
I
that's the good
mean,
and
you
bad.
have to at least do some of that when you're there.
I, you know, when I would come back from the SHOT Show, my wife would usually ask, "Did you, you know, sell any projects, or did you buy some guns?" And I would just say, "Yes,
Yes,
yes,
that covers
yes,
it all.
yes, all covered."
I
So
think that we should point out, in case anyone from any of the big yacht manufacturers are listening, that you are a tremendous fan of boating in style, and we have talked about it. If only Shaylene had a good network in the boating industry, this would be your second passion.
they compete with each other.
Yeah, right. They're both during the
They,
dry
they,
warm
they,
months.
it hurts, and this is part of the New England issue. Is you can't shoot too much, when it's cold, and you can't boat necessarily when it's cold. So my May to September is kind of my prime season for both.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I've and again, back to connecting to the hiring recruiting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't worked in the boating industry.
Yeah.
But years ago, I'd reached out to the CEO of one of the larger manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
which happens to be a boat I now own. And I'd reached out to him on LinkedIn, and just said, "Hey, love your boat. Think it's great." Probably gave some little insight that I'd done some research, and I was looking to obviously do some strategic planning, for this company. And surprisingly, he replied to me. Okay, because again, you don't always do that.
Yeah.
And so I got connected with him on LinkedIn. Maybe 5 years after that, I ended up buying one of his boats, and I pinged him and said, "Hey, by the way, I bought one of your boats." And he's like, he sent me a handwritten note, welcome to
Wow.
the family. Sent me some hats and license plates, and like you don't see the handwritten stuff ever. And so now we've kind of become friends. And it's funny because then he said, "By the way, what do you do?" And I told him I work for Camfour. He goes, "Like, can you get me a gun?" I go, "Let's go." So it's just this whole networking thing. I'm telling my kids now. So I got two younger daughters. They're both working, but it's this whole concept of networking, right? And building up that relationship, and building that network now, and keeping in touch those that understand networking. As you know, a lot of people don't get it or don't want to do it, but there's those that do. And you can tell that in the conversation, either they're giving or they're very reciprocal to giving back to you.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When I thought about this discussion with you, it's that whole networking concept. I'm telling my kids, build that network. You've got LinkedIn now, which is a great way to do that. A great tool. You may not get responses every time, but you reach out, and I reached out, and I'm connected with the CEO of this boat manufacturer, and I'm just
That's
like,
just cool.
And he's since invited me. He goes, "You come anytime you want to come. It's on me. I'll give you a tour. I'll put you up. It's just this fun stuff."
It is
Yeah.
fun stuff. But I think you bring up your examples you're giving really are kind of something that we've talked about. And I know when I asked you to be on this, you mentioned this, and this is your original idea to me, but do something you love, right?
Yes.
When I ask you to think about what your younger self would say, it's it was something along the lines of do what you love.
I say to my kids, I say to anybody, I mean, how often do you talk to someone and they don't like their job?
Mm-hmm.
They don't like what they're doing. I mean, to me, it's the majority, right?
Yeah.
So if you're young, start now.
Yeah.
If you want to be an artist, if you want to be a musician, if you want to be in the shooting industry, start building those connections. It might take 3 or 4 or 5 years. Honestly, it took me 2 to 3 years to get embedded in consulting with the firearms industry. It wasn't a 1-year thing. I had to invest.
Yeah. You have to earn it.
You've invested, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
As you're younger, start building that network. And again, there's plenty of education out there on how to network. But you ask someone, hey, you got 3 people I could talk to, and you just start working it. It's not hard, but you got to put effort into it.
Yep. No, you're right about that. You're right about that. Well, I really appreciate you sharing this with us. This is such a treat. You'll have to come back when after you get through another couple consulting gigs and tell us some stories without giving away names.
Plenty of stories. Always great to talk with you. You do a great job.
Thanks.
So I'll end it with this because again, I'm out networking now, and when I'm always asking people, hey, what recruiters do you know who should talk to? And Shaylene's number one. Always top number one. I got to put that out there. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's I feel humbled and grateful. We just exist to serve our industry, and it's just just like coming from SHOT Show is just soul filling. It's just, you got to be there to serve the people, and you turn into your friends.
Well, I'll again, the last thing is, because you and I chatted years ago, I think, and when I did a podcast or webinar, something like that, and I asked you, what would you say to someone coming into the industry or trying to get into the industry? And your comment was, they need to realize they're going to work for a gun company. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what part of that don't they get? But it's the passion behind, what we do. We're not just, selling widgets. We're, a lot of these people are Second Amendment. They're very passionate about what they do, but it creates the great friendships.
Yeah, it does. And a lot of times we're all aligned, kind of, voting generally the same way. So it's very different than other industries in that it is politically affected. Very true.
Very true. So thank you. You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you being on our podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening to the HeadHunters Northwest podcast, and join in for our next guest. Thanks.